he's gonna do his thing.
Oh, I did it again. I did the same thing. I'm trying.
I'm gonna bring back
I can't port that fast. I just instantly want to port my circle.
The way opens. Come, walk the path to power. There is no other path.
Hey, what's up, Void Lords and Masters of the Universe? So, that's intimidating, right? The Black Mage rotation. I mean, people say it's intimidating, it's unintuitive, overwhelming, and I agree with people that say that. Like, before I picked Black Mage, that's how I felt about it. But this video is gonna prove to you that it's more bark than bite. And just like Shadow Priest, it has a lot of, what's the word? Perception issues. Lots of perception issues about the spec. If you can get past the fears of the spec, it has a lot of reward to kind of go with it. So I want to get you past that. Let's get into the rotation of Black Mage today. And with that, I'm going to throw in like my UI. And my UI dissects the rotation. It makes it feel a little bit more bite-sized, like closer to like how WoW is. And you might like it, or at least it will paint the picture for you, even if you don't use it yourself. So I'm going to break this up into 3 sections. We have, the rotation section. I'm going to cover, my custom UI, see if it can spark ideas for your own. And at the end of this video, I'm going to cover some basic Final Fantasy UI tips. Since I know a lot of you haven't necessarily played the game before, at least my subscribers haven't. So again, my goal here is, it ain't that bad, man. And get past it, and this spec is really awesome to play. So if you looking for something to throw your heart and passion into, I highly recommend it. So let's get into it. Alright, let's simplify this. We're gonna start with Frost. And I picked the double sharp opener because it's similar to the basic flow rotation. So Blizzard 3 enters Frost. We're going to unlock Enochian. Enochian unlocks extra powers like the Blizzard 4. Blizzard 4 is now castable because we did the previous 2 actions. So we have 2 conditions or it's not castable. And because of that, it's sort of like a Void Bolt. Thunder 3 is our dot spell. This is independent. It does not matter what fire or frost that you're in. Alright, let's get into fire. We're gonna start our fire phase, just like a void form really, with Fire 3. It unlocks Enochian, and then we can cast Fire 4, assuming that you already casted Enochian. I can't say that. Anyway, so that's like another Void Bolt. So, just like the Blizzard, the fire is the same thing. So you see I marked it here. For 15 seconds, once we press it, it's like entering Frost. Same thing with fire, with the Fire 3. This makes the Enochian spell castable. That'll last infinity. And doing both of those actions will give you access to the big dick spells, like which is Fire 4 and Blizzard 4. They're like our Void Bolts. I say Void Bolt because it also had a prerequisite to become castable. So next is our Sharp Cast. Our Sharp Cast is going to extend our fire phase, if you will, or our fire void form. Because the Sharpcast makes that fire spell special, we get a proc later on of this Fire 3 spell. Otherwise, we wouldn't use Fire 3 again. We're also going to follow that up with a Swift Cast, and then we're going to do a Despair. So Despair finishes our Fire phase. The reason for that is we've been blowing mana in the Fire phase the entire time, so now our mana is spent out. The last little bit, just to get it to true 0, Despair like just uses it all. After that, we're gonna pop a mana font, which gives us a little bit of magic points or mana back, which lets us squeeze out just a little bit more and push that void form. Oh, I mean the fire phase, right? Anyway, so we get a couple more casts in. So next is the sharp cast that I didn't explain yet. So a sharp cast in our opener allows us to proc our damage over time spell, which is marked by the little dotted line. That makes it instant and allows us to get more casts in our fire. So next we have our 3 cooldowns that we use to buff our biggest dick of fire 4s earlier in the fire phase. We have our triple cast, makes the next 3 casts instant, the potion, and our cooldown. It acts similar, it's like a rune of power from Mage, but it's also like a power infusion from Priest, because it gives like you can cast faster, like it basically gives you haste. So if I manage our mini void forms of the frost void form and the fire void form correctly, or phases, we're feeding the void also. So you have 2 void form phases back and forth, a burn and conserve feeding a void, and every 30 seconds we're awarded a Xenoglossy spell, which is awesome, big dick, amazing movement spell. So 2 void forms feeding into a 3rd. Kind of cool if you think about it. So the next thing I'm going to get into is how I manage my UI as a black mage, because I handled this a little bit special. Because with black mage, there's a condition similar to void form Shadow Priest, where when you're in a certain stance, there, like, say you're not stance, but like say you're in frost, right? If you're in frost, you're never gonna want to cast certain spells until you're in fire. And the same thing with frost. There's only certain spells you're going to want to cast. So the way that I handled this is, and I saved myself a couple of keybinds doing this. You don't have to do this. I just did it for myself. I really am picky about my keybinds and which ones I can smash the hardest and the most solid. So what I did was, in the middle section, I basically built a minimal bar. It's only 4, 5, 6, 7 major abilities across. I have 1 through 4. I use F1, F2, which I don't recommend, and then tilde. Those are my primary fucking smash buttons. So I said, alright, in that sequence, I can basically narrow down a frost stance, if you will, and pretty much they're frost spells. So Blizzard 3 is what we're going to enter frost with, and then like Blizzard 4, it's not available right now. But as soon as I cast Blizzard 3, I'll be able to cast it. Well, actually I'm gonna cast an Notion next. Okay, let's try not to stutter. And now I can cast Blizzard spells to my heart content. So basically this is similar to like Void Form. Imagine a Void Form going into like Frost stance. And I'll let this drop. So now that my buffs have dropped, these are grayed out once again. But I pretty much made this bar all my frost spells, with 1 exception. Or 2, rather. Thunder is our dot, our damage over time. It's neutral to regardless of fire or frost, so it's on this bar. The other exception is I put in a fire 3. And you can see from this cogwheel, I have a macro for this. And basically, when I'm done with my frost rotation and I'm ready to enter fire, I'll basically hit number 3, and it's going to change my bars. So I'll hit number 3, and I won't cast it just to show you. So now I've macroed in a hotbar change that now I'm in fire. And I can keep spamming number 3, and I'm not going to pay a penalty for macros. And maybe I'll make a separate video about macros and why they're bad in this game. But there can be exceptions, and I believe this particular macro to switch hotbars is actually fine. It's not perfect, so if you can if you want to avoid it, feel free, but for me, it was worth the little bit of nuance to it. So if I hit 1 again, if you notice in my fire bar, if I hit 1, it's a cogwheel. If I hit 1, it'll bring me my frost bars back. So again, 3 fire bars, 1 frost bars. And that just saved me a couple keybinds and let me kind of have the keybinds that I want for my smashy spells. Just a whatever, like I just felt like I would enjoy this more. I tried it out and I absolutely love it. So there is nuance to macros. I'm going to cover that in another video. This one is fine because once I hit 3 for the fire, 3 is no longer a macro in this particular hotbar. So if I'm, you know, repeatedly fucking smashing that key like you would do, I highly recommend spamming of keys. I think I've covered that in one of my older videos. As soon as I hit it the second time, I'm in my fire bar anyway, and I'll get the full benefit of spell queuing and no disadvantage as far as like macros are concerned. So again, frost bar, fire bar. So really, frost versus fire, they're mirror images of each other. So basically, Blizzard 3 is like entering Blizzard, or entering Frost. So once I enter Frost, I could do my Nokian spell, and then I have full access to everything. Now, the thing about this is, I had to switch to fire there pretty quick. I have 15 seconds to enter the next phase or whatever. Or, in the case of fire, I can extend it with like this Fire 1, for example. Which I covered in my rotational, like, breakdown. But basically, I'm never gonna want to cast this fire spell unless I'm already in fire. And this is why I separated out the fire and the frost bars. It really had no point in like making a like ridiculous amount of keybinds, because I'm just never gonna use that in Frost. So again, I'll just switch here back to Frost. Anyway, I'm not gonna do a rotation while I'm trying to like go over my UI, but so the main bar here is dissecting fire and frost. The tilde is the AoE counterparts. I did not cover AoE in this video. Basically, you're swapping out your Blizzard 3 and your Fire 3s for the Flare and Freeze, and you only use those in AoE situations. Basically dungeons. Haven't seen a raid where that was a thing, but basically AoE conditions. So the other thing I did was, because there's no weak ores in this game, I moved all of my cooldowns to their own bar towards the top. And I did that because they're more in line with my eyesight, so I can see without looking all over the place on my screen, you know, whether or not, you know, sharp cast is available, or my triple cast, or my swift cast. These are basically all my cooldowns or my ley lines. Same thing with my potion, my mana ward, you know, it's basically like a dispersion, and my port, which is basically like a blink. So I want to know if these things are off cooldown, and because there's no weak ores in this game, I separated them into their own bar, and basically these are my alt modifiers. Everything on this bar is an alt modifier. I'm sorry, I take that back. That's the bottom bar. These are actually my Naga mouse buttons. So all my cooldowns, and they're all on my Naga basically. The other thing is, I'll show you something. Only could show you this if I go to HUD layout. So Hotbar 3, if I move this, I hit save for now, even though I'm gonna have to fix that. And one more thing I'm gonna change. Transparency. So what I did here was save it. I built 2 bars, but I hotkeyed, you know, my Naga 7 and my Naga 8 on 2 separate hotbars, but I overlapped them, like, visually. But I basically put a lower transparency on my Xenoglossy and my Sprint, because though I don't need the visual space, like my resource gauge tells me I have a Xenoglossy. So I don't really give a shit about seeing that on my bars. So I chose to fade that out. So by overlapping them and then fading that bar. So I'll show you what I did. After I set up those two separate bars, I overlap them like this. And then I said, you know, Hotbar 5, I want to change this transparency to basically be kind of still there, but really faint. So that's how you get this effect is, you know, we have a Xenoglossy here, and then the sprint macro that I have. The sprint macro is just for mounts and stuff. Like if I'm not in a... If I can mount, I mount. If not, I'll sprint. So the other thing is, the bar down at the bottom is actually my alt modifiers, because I kind of misspoke earlier. Potion off my bar, that's garbage. I need to research potions more in this game. That's the health potion. But Alt 8, Alt 9, basically I did the alt modifier spells of the originals. So for example, Naga Mouse 8 is my Xenoglossy, that's my Void spell. The AoE version of that is Foul, so I did Alt 8. Same thing with the Thunder, except I hijacked 9 instead, so Alt 9 is Thunder. I use Sharpcast, or Sharpcast is very common to use with Thunder spells, so that's why I did Alt 9 version of that. Transpose, I did not cover in this video. It's the, oh my god, please save Void form, I fucked up kind of spell, or going in between trash packs type of spell. Outside of that, these are all alt modifiers. Limit Break is like a heroism. It's something that a Black Mage usually doesn't cast. I'm not going to get into limit breaks here, but I have it on R key. The rest of these are alt modifiers though. So for customization, or really what I want to deep dive here, is I have a couple recommendations. Number one, have your cooldowns, even if you make a separate redundant bar, show, and then make your hotkey bar invisible if you need to. Put your cooldowns in front of your face, because there is no weak auras in this game. I managed to separate them on their own bar, but you don't have to do that. If you're like set in what keybind you want, you want them on your main bar, you could also make that bar visible and then make separate bars that are like basically copies of them and put them in front of your face to simulate as if you had a weak aura tracking it. That's my recommendations anyway. You know, it's something that I'd done in Rift when I played that game for several years at a very high level. That game did not have weak auras, and that's kind of what we did to get around some of the visibility issues with cooldowns. Outside of that, I will show you one last thing in case you're super new. Or, let me just show you really quick where my dots show up. So when I put a Thunder dot up, I have it, you know, kind of right next to my target here. The other thing is if I start popping cooldowns and I have buffs just below that. So it's all kind of central to me. If I had a debuff, it would show to the right side of my character, but they're all central. So I can see, you know, what I have active, right? So like, since I have my circles, and I'm in the circle, I step out of the circle, I have a circle down, but I'm not in it. I can port to it. Now I'm back in the circle. You can see it go away when I leave the circle. So my dot and my buffs are kind of right in line with each other. I recommend you make them very visible. And I'll show you what they're called in the UI, just so you can understand that. So the target info status, which is this one, this is your dots. And the settings that I have is... these are my settings, you might want to copy them. So target display info independently, I separated them out and I put them at different visibility and different sizes. And status info enhancements, this is like the buffs on your character. I'll show you what settings I have for those. I have split element into 3 separate groups. Group 1, element size, and I'm not going to remember this because it's been so damn long, but you can see how it made a separate group 1 for enhancements and group 2 is enfeeblements. That's going to be like the stuns, just right here. Okay. Okay, here. So to the right of my character is status info, enfeeblements. If I was stunned, it's going to show me here. If I have invulnerability stacks, which means I ate mechanics and now I take increased damage, it's going to show to the right of my character. So I tried to mimic my UI in WoW as closely as possible. If I was starting from scratch, most of my stuff should be even higher and central around my character even more so than it is. So highly recommend that in general. So like target info should probably be higher, this should be higher, the whole UI should probably be shifted upward, but a lot of it has to do with your monitor and where your line of sight it tends to be, but as much central to your character as absolutely possible. I'm trying to think what else. The elemental gauge, which is our resource gauge, there is another setting for this. You can switch it to simple mode. The simple mode is, I'll hit save just so I can show you what it looks like. So you can change the resource gauge to simple mode. So you can see it still shows that I have 2 Xenoglossy crystals. If I open with Blizzard, enter Blizzard phase, shows the 15-second timer, shows this cogwheel here that I'm now ticking on the void. So you can choose this as well. Personally, I don't like it. I prefer the elemental gauge. I feel like it's a lot more. I dropped my buff and I didn't even recognize it in this version. But it's up to you. Some people might like that. Let me turn mine back on. HUD. Turn this back. This one. Shit. Elemental gauge. Okay. Settings. I want the original one. Thanks. I really like the resource gauge for the Black Mage. I think it's very visual and it helps you to really comprehend the rotation and what everything does. So personally, I recommend the resource gauge, but if you're all about simplicity, even more so than me, the other option is available. There's a couple things that I felt like are worth pointing out. So if you go to character configuration, the very first thing that you want to do is check names and only show you. These are things that I did, so if you like my settings you can copy them, but so for name settings of myself, only if I happen to target myself, and I don't mind showing full name because I don't target myself very often, and I never want to see my HP bar. It's redundant of my, you know, UI, so I said never to that. So myself only when targeted, HP never because I have my health. Other than that, I left the rest. For companions, I put never never. Pets, I put never. On the other category, and again, this reduces clutter. The UI text is very annoying, so I found that these were the cleanest, and I don't regret turning any of this off. So for party members, I only show when targeted, and if I target them, I show full name. I don't mind showing their title if I target them because it's going to be rare. I turn off the HP bar of party members. I'm going to have party frames. It's redundant of my party frames, so I put never, so that's here. Companions, only if I target their companions, and I never show their HP bar. Again, friendlies, I really don't want to see their nameplates or their health bars. I have party frames for what's important, even if I was healing. Pet display name settings, only when targeted. If I target something, I don't mind seeing everything. For alliance members, so alliance members means basically an alliance raid, and that's pretty much like the LFR raid. So I'm like, you know what, I only want to see their shit when targeted. I don't mind showing all the other stuff, but never their HP bar. So if I target them, I'm going to see their name, but I'm not going to see their HP bar. Again, I can see it from the frames themselves, and it's redundant. and pet display names only if I target it, right here. Other characters or whatever, only, again, same thing when targeted. Full name, I said sure, and I turned off HP bars of basically all friendlies. Again, it's redundant of party frames, so you're welcome to copy this stuff if you'd like. Friends, similar, when targeted, yada yada. Don't want to see their HP bar. I pretty much have this consistent with all of friendly targets. So non-playing characters, this is going to be like enemies, such as the dummies in front of me. So I pretty much was consistent across the board. I decided to not show their names ever, mostly because just switch it for a moment. If I show their names, then usually I get an extra letter icon next to their names. And of course it's not doing it right now for demonstration, but they're ugly, so I turn them off. I haven't regretted it. It's not like WoW, so you can try my settings, see if you really miss it or not. HP bar settings, I want to see nameplates, so I put always. And I was pretty consistent across. I don't care if they're engaged, unengaged, claimed. The only thing I might have changed is like the tint of the color. To change the color, you hit this little icon here, and you can change it to whatever color you want. I like a lot of whites, so I went with whites and grays, things like that. So these are my settings. If you'd like to copy them, totally up to you. It is definitely a preference. Objects, honestly, I'm gonna change this to never, because I regret that. So that's what I have for that setting. The other thing about players, let me go back. When you're in a major city, and I'm not gonna port just for this, but turning off names really helps visually in major cities to not like hate your UI or hate what you're seeing. I felt like in this game, as opposed to WoW, seeing their names when you're not targeting them isn't worth the clutter on your screen because you can't customize the font all that much. So again, I highly recommend my settings. Obviously I picked them for good reason. I worked on this for a couple of months and this is where I ended up. Outside of that, those are the big ones. There might be some things I add to the description if I think of it later, so be sure to read the description if you want more tips for this stuff. Alright, so hopefully I taught you something new, and maybe I want to mention to people that are maybe a little interested in Final Fantasy or Black Mage that maybe haven't played it before. I'm going to throw in here, the game is really good to pick up on the side when you don't want to be serious about it, because leveling is slow in the game. It almost plays like an old console Final Fantasy MMO, or Final Fantasy console game, and less like an MMO. So don't jump into the game, ideally not when you're leaving WoW and you're like, okay, I want to jump into Final Fantasy and be raiding tomorrow. If you're assuming you're a raider or a serious player. This is a good game to play on the side, get a character to max level at your leisure so you can enjoy the story, take your time with it. It plays similar to, imagine like a classic WoW, but like modern day version of it, smashed together with a Final Fantasy console game. So this is something that you want to play slowly, on the side, when you don't care about when you get to the finish line, so you can really enjoy it for everything that it's worth. And the end game is going to play a lot like Wrath of the Lich King, World of Warcraft. The end game is very similar to that. I can make a whole video on it, so I'm not going to really get into that much here. But just a couple things I just wanted to throw in there in case that helps you out, or to just know that information. I know Shadowlands is coming out, so people are probably going to be way too busy to even try it out, but I do know of a few. But yeah, do it on the side. That's what I recommend. And if you're serious about the game and you're looking to judge it for the speed of gameplay, I'll make a video on that at some point, that it plays much faster at like higher levels, right around level 60, but even at level 80, 70, and 80, it gets even faster. And I could argue that it has key presses that are faster than WoW. So I'm going to make a video on that as well because I think it's really interesting. Perception issue. But if you're jumping into the game with the intention of testing the waters, very hard to judge it until you get deeper and deeper in. It's a longer payoff, old school MMO, and closer to classic than it is retail WoW. But the end game, the end game is pretty much the same shit. Anyway, if you want to follow me on Twitch, I do stream all kinds of content these days, more and more raiding as the months progress into the future. And hope I taught you something new today. Later.
Your minds remain closed. Come, mortals, glimpse the infinite truths. Gaze deep into shadow. Stare into the void. Here, every vision shall be made real.